What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Tripp. Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Live podcast. We interview the very best entrepreneurs and real estate investors all throughout this great nation, and today's no different. We've had such tremendous guests, and I'm so excited to bring on Mr. Gabriel Garcia from South Florida, from the Miami area. What's going on, Gabriel?
What's up? What's up? Honored to be on your show, bro.
I'm excited to have you. I've actually had a lot of people from your area. I'm sure obviously people that you know on the show. We talked, Ray Gonzalez has been on the show. We've had Mark Evans on the show, Alex Pardo on the show. It's like we should just turn this into the Miami area podcast.
There you go.
Well, tell Gabriel, for the people that don't know who you are, kind of give us kind of a little bit of background about who you are, how you got your start in real estate, and what you're up to today.
Yeah, so I'm about 30 years old. I started wholesaling back in I went to a Robert Kiyosaki seminar back in Thanksgiving of 2012, actually. So 2013 was when I started putting the pedal to the metal and trying to just implement everything I learned from the seminar with very little success. And then later on, my wife's parents had passed away. At the time, she was my girlfriend, and she got some money from their estate. So she saw that I was like really, really dedicated to building this business, and she gave me the money for the down payment. I got a local mentor who kind of told me he would show me the ropes, just split my deals with me like 50-50, you know? And then I had to split 50-50 with my wife. So I was making like 25% of whatever I brought in the first year. But that's kind of how I got started, you know? And I really... When I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, what turned on the light bulb for me was the fact that you can have money work for you, and that money can come in whether you worked or not. So that just turned something on inside of me that just unlocked a ton of energy and willpower. And I knew working at a job that I was working at the time, making $30K a year, that for me to acquire the real estate that I needed to support my lifestyle was going to take forever. And I'm like, I need to do something. So I started going to seminars and learning as much as I could. And that's when I learned about wholesaling. I'm like, this is the way I can generate the cash to buy the real estate that's going to support my lifestyle, you know? So that's how it all started, you know? And then eventually, then you start learning about business because, you know, to be a good wholesaler, you need to get good into business. And then from there, it's like, hey, I want to build a business that actually runs without me. So, you know, those are kind of been my two passions, both the business side and the real estate side, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. You said a couple of things I definitely want to touch on. I definitely want to come back to Rich Dad Education because I think most people who are listening to this, you know my story, and that's how I got started as well. So I definitely want to come back and touch on that and Rich Dad Poor Dad, just the book.
Sure.
But talk about what's your business model today? It sounds like I heard you just say that wholesaling was something more that you gravitated towards, and then actually building a business out of it, something that could work for you instead of you working in it. Is that your business model today, is to wholesale and take that money to go buy some real estate, or what specifically is your business model and your kind of end game?
Yeah. For me, my end game, I talked about this the other day. I got a lot of feedback on a post. I don't feel that wholesaling is a legacy business, right? And what I mean by that is I don't feel like it's a business that's gonna change the world and bring, and bring it's. I don't feel like there's a lot of a big higher purpose driven behind that business. And so, you know, for me, wholesaling was just a means to generate cash. And it's also a means for me to develop the skills that I need to become a businessman, right? And an entrepreneur. Okay. So I kind of see it as the path of personal development and growth for myself. And then, yes, the end game is to generate cash from that business to fuel my investments that can support my lifestyle and allow me to now use that platform to launch into something bigger. In the future, I'd like to have some type of a speaking presence and more of an influential presence in the entrepreneur community because that drives me. That's kind of why I'm here. You know, I love to make an impact. I love to give, and it fuels me, you know?
It's interesting. I mean, we can go in a lot of different directions. We talked about that before the show even kicked off. And it's interesting kind of how I already see this podcast kind of going is that I agree with you, man. I think that what you just said a second ago is something that does not get mentioned very often. wholesaling is not a legacy business. That's just a really interesting statement. The question I would have is, why is that important?
Why is having a legacy business important?
Why is realizing that wholesaling is not a legacy business, why is that an important realization, and what are you doing about it?
I think for me, right, I can only speak for myself. I think for me, it's an important realization because it's just a stepping stone, right? It's not the end. It's not the end all be all. And it's just viewing it as like, hey, this is a stone or the ladder that I need to climb, and part of my evolution to go to the next level. And so I just see it as that. It's not like, this is, I do want to be the best wholesaler, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, if I go back into, when I get to my deathbed, however old God allows me to live, I don't want to look back and just say I was the best wholesaler. Like, I'm not going to feel like fulfilled. Like I want to be a person that leaves a massive impact on this planet and does something to just make this place better than it was before I was here,
Well, Gabriel, I think that a lot of people have businesses that the business itself may not be, well, some might argue that wholesaling could leave a legacy in the sense that you're helping people out of bad situations. But I think a lot of people with businesses, it's more about what they do with the money that comes
Absolutely.
from. It's not necessarily that the business itself. And I understand that that's for you. I guess I'm trying to dig deeper into this because I came to kind of the same realization that wholesaling. I didn't say it the way you said it. It's not a legacy business. I said it more. It's not. It doesn't fuel me.
Right.
It doesn't drive me to be better. But I love what you said about it. It helped me, and obviously it helped you become just a better business person, period. It helped you with marketing and sales and just business operations, just normal business operations. You talked about numbers that I want to dig into in here in a second. Just tracking your numbers and understanding that that's what business is all about. If you understand how to read your numbers, then they can understand that you can really drive that business to where it's supposed to be. So I get all that. I guess what I'm wondering is, can't someone have a business that doesn't necessarily, the business itself doesn't necessarily leave a legacy, but the cash that comes from it can lead you down that path?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And it also, like, in addition, it's also made me some awesome relationships. I know you're a huge relationship guy. And that's a great piece that also wholesaling has also led me to, is to meet incredible people and build great relationships with other like-minded individuals,
No doubt about it, man. I think that's the key, right? That's the key. How can you build those relationships, and how can you continue to leave a legacy with those people that you have those relationships with? Let's dig into some other stuff. You said you're 30 today. That's how old you are?
Today I'm 30. I'm turning actually 31 next week, actually, March 11th.
You turned 31, so by the time this comes out, you'll already be 31. But you got started almost 7 years ago. So you got started in this business really young.
Yeah.
Talk about who you were in 2012 before you went to that Rich Dad seminar. Who were you? What were you doing? Did you graduate high school? Did you graduate college? Like who were you, and why did you gravitate towards real estate? Why was that interesting to you at that time?
Yeah, it's interesting. So at that time, I wasn't even thinking about real estate. Like, real estate just wasn't even in my state of consciousness at all. It's funny because every time I plan my life and I design my life, once 3, 4, 5 years happen, I've always said that it's never gone the way I've designed, but it's always gotten better than what I could have imagined, and I think there's a spiritual power behind that kind of will guide you and take you to places that you may not necessarily think you're going, but it knows better than you do, right? It's smarter, more intelligent than you are, and wise than you are. But anyways, at that time I had just graduated from Wholesale University. It's a music, it's like an entertainment type school. I was actually a rapper in my past life. So I was rapping and and doing recording engineering and all that stuff. And that was kind of like what fueled me at the time, is I wanted to be like a famous rapper. You know,
so surely you got some examples of that we could link up in the show, right?
Yeah, sure. And so that was my fuel. I just figured like, hey, a little bit earlier in my life, I used to like sell drugs. So I was always like, there was always something in me that always wanted to make more money. I was never like satisfied with the status quo. I just didn't know how to channel that energy in the beginning. You know, I had to learn that. And so even rapping, I don't think in the beginning, it wasn't a great way to channel my energy either. But that's what I saw, like, hey, people can like, you don't have to go to school, and like, you can make like real money doing this. So I figured, well, that's what I want to do, because this is fun. I never wanted to have like a quote unquote job. I'm like, why do I want to go to a 9-to-5 every day and be miserable like most people are? Like, that just never resonated with me. I wanted to be different. I've always thought differently than most people, and always kind of took my own path. I've always been a rebel when I was younger and all that. So, I went to school for that, graduated. I was already doing music for like 5-6 years before, but never really made any money. It was just like kind of like, it was this dream. And in hindsight, it was kind of like a hobby really, but a very passionate hobby at the time. And when I started working in the music industry, I started working at record labels. My thought was like, let me work at the record labels. Let me learn the business inside and out, make connections, build relationships, and use that as a platform to launch my career. That was my thought process. Problem was, at that time, my parents were supporting me, right? My dad gave me like $1,000 a month, which was actually one of the best like things that ever happened to me, because moving out of town was amazing, because I left my hometown, was out for a year. My dad gave me $1,000 a month, and he's like, you just got to figure it out. Here's $1,000, figure it out. And that created a massive drive, because I hated the lack. Like, every time I wanted to go out with friends to go to dinner, or like, I mean, there are some months where we just couldn't make it happen. And I would call my dad like, hey, I'm short. He's like, I told you, $1,000 a month, you got to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And so like, once I graduated, I'm like, I don't care what I do. I just know I don't want to be broke. Mm-hmm. And so, working in the music industry, you work for free. Like, that's how it is. Like, you go work and people work for free. And I started talking to guys here. I'm like, yo, how long you been here? Now guys would tell me, oh, I've been here for 3 years. And I'm like, you're still not getting paid? He's like, no. And I'm like, dude, I think I'm in the wrong place. So, I did that for some time. And after a year, I was just like, man, I'm like, I need to do something. Like, this isn't going to support the lifestyle that I want. And then on top of that, you have a lot of people in the industry that are just operating at a much more dense state of consciousness, if you want to say. They're focused on the wrong things. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of just negative activity going on. And it just didn't feel right. So eventually I got a job at Humana working, and at the time I was going to the library doing all my off time. I said, look, I need to make money. I don't know anything about money, so let me start reading about money. So I went to the business and money books in the library and just started reading. I read Richest Man in Babylon. It was one of the books that I picked up, and then Cash Flow Quadrant, which then led me to Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then all these books just started turning on the switch. And that's how, literally like right when I started my job at Humana, I think like a month or 2 months into it, that's when I went to the Rich Dad Poor Dad seminar. And at the time I was paying cash flow online and just like programming my mind to start looking for money and thinking for opportunities,
I love your story, man. It's unbelievable how similar your story is to mine. I was selling long-term care insurance and prescription drug packages. And I was coaching basketball, Division I college basketball for basically free. Like you just said, like just giving your time to try to make the connections to build. And then you look at the guy next to you and, hey, how long have you been doing this? 8 years, 10 years, and you're still making $20,000 as a low-level assistant coach. Oh, and then I went to a Rich Dad seminar. It's really interesting how our stories are parallel there.
You're a basketball guy.
Yeah.
You're in Philly, right?
No, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, for some reason I thought you were in Philly. You guys don't got a team then in Alabama.
We got college.
You got college, but not NBA.
No, NBA is a totally different game. But no, I coached. I coached a lot of. I coach kids that are in the NBA, But
Really?
college and high school game it's completely different. It's completely
Any notable players that you coached in the NBA?
yeah, ain't no doubt.
Come on.
Guys that are right here from the state of Alabama, a guy like DeMarcus Cousins, Eric
Really?
Bledsoe, guy that
Wow.
just signed a big contract. There's a lot of stuff going on in Alabama basketball. I used to kind of really be wrapped up in that world, but long since passed. Long since passed. But I think it's interesting because you're chasing that dream like I was chasing a dream, but ultimately it sounds like you were chasing money. You wanted to start chasing, and that's why I got into it. I got into, just being honest, I got into it. I was chasing the money.
Sure.
Like I love basketball, but basketball wasn't really doing for me like I thought. And then you say your now wife gave you some money. Well, my wife is a pharmacist making good money, and so I was able to chase this real estate thing and make it real. It's very interesting how our stories are parallel there.
That's awesome.
But I want to go back. But the big differentiator though is that I was 30 and you were like 22. Or 23, 24. Talk about just being that young. Like, talk to the kid that's listening to this right now. Because what I've found, Gabriel, is I've found that most people who are getting into real estate today, it used to be that 55-year-old who's facing retirement, didn't have any retirement saved up. And I feel like now it's been a huge shift. And you could probably credit that to people like you, people like Max Maxwell, the younger guys that are out there for everyone to see. They're younger and they're more millennial type of people.
Yeah.
So I've seen just in the last couple of years a complete shift in the real estate investing, the creative game, wholesaling, buying rentals, subject to, and just doing some creative things with rental properties and things like that, where it's the millennial. It's the 22, 23, 24 to maybe 33, 34-year-old is the major demographic right now trying to break into real estate. And I don't know that I'm seeing them. They're watching a lot of YouTube videos and they're listening to podcasts and things, but I don't hear them doing some of the things that you did, Gabriel, like going to the library and cracking open the books. Talk about what that did for you. It sounds to me like it was more mindset for you than anything. Talk about that.
I think I evolved a little bit. I don't even want to say the word evolve, but I think I matured a little bit faster than most people do my age. For the simple fact was, I can share a couple things, but when I was like 18, 19, I was at a very, very dark point in my life. So again, I was always rebellious. I always kind of did my own thing, broke the status quo. And so at that point, 18, 19, I was a drug dealer selling a bunch of drugs, making good money at the time, rapping. And I had a girlfriend at the time who I was madly in love with and just broke everything apart. And I went to a massive state of depression. But amongst other things that happened, that pain that I felt for that like year to 2 years where I was getting over just all this negativity in my life, forced me to like find answers and search. And, I don't want to get into like religion and stuff, but I was a born Catholic, brought up through the whole, Catholic doctrine, did the whole thing from, communion to, confirmation and all that stuff. Went to private school almost my entire life up until high school. And so it just, for me, like the answers weren't there. Things didn't make sense for me. And so I had to go find answers elsewhere. And I did. And eventually when I was ready, the answers came when I actually stopped looking and like stopped trying so hard to figure out like why, and I kind of let go, things started coming. And that's when I found my spiritual path. I learned about like meditation. I found a spiritual mentor who, taught me a lot about life, and that really helped me, develop. And so, my mentor gave me a lot of books to read, and I never read books in my life. I never read any, every time I was at school and I had to read a book in school, it was like torture. I hated it. But when I started reading these books, I'm like, this is different because this is helping me. Like, this is actually benefiting my life. And so I became obsessed and I started reading a ton. And so just that, from the meditation to the spiritual growth and the reading, it just developed a different character, outlook, perspective on my life. That once I left school, I already had certain tools. So like getting a mentor as an example, like, maybe a lot of young people, like they wait too long for that to happen. And I already knew like what getting a mentor for me did to my life. It changed my entire life, like in so many positive ways. So, you know, I already knew that I already knew the formula. I was like, why do I need to reinvent the wheel? Like there's already somebody that knows exactly how to do this that can just show me.
Yeah.
And just tell me exactly what to do, so I don't have to go through all the headache and the mistakes and the hassle and the frustration. And so, you know, reading the books was the first way I said, well, that's the way I can find the mentor. And then going to the events and then talking to people. Hey, you talk to this guy, and that's kind of how it all kind of worked its way out, you know.
And it sounds like you're not just a real estate mentor, a spiritual mentor too. And you were how old when you got a spiritual mentor?
I found my spiritual path in 2008. So
11 years ago. So you were like 19 or 20.
Yeah.
So talk to that 19 or 20, 22, 24-year-old that's listening to this right now. Talk to that guy. I heard you say something like you just let go. What do you mean specifically? Like talk really specific about that. What did you let go? How can someone actually do that? I faced major depression when I was getting out of high school too. And I think there are probably a lot of people who can relate to you and your story who are either going through that now or have already been through it and don't really understand how to fully get to that light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to, this is a topic that's really hard to like, I'm going to explain it as best as I can, but there's a spiritual principle that you can say that's called like effortless effort, right? Different spiritual paths call it different things. And there's this concept that the harder you try to do something, the less successful you're going to be at that. And what I mean by that is you can probably relate, right? Like when you're in this state of like, you're doing what you love or you're doing something that fuels you, like you're working, you're putting effort in, but it kind of feels effortless. You're not like forcing yourself to do it. Like you're not struggling with the task at hand. It just flows, right? It's a state of flow. So it's kind of the same thing. Like when you're going through this depression, you know, or whatever, there's typically a void inside of you for the most part, right? There's something that doesn't feel good or something that you're lacking. You feel that you're lacking, right? The illusion that you feel like you're lacking something. And so we start like banging the door for answers. But the more that we bang that door, the harder we bang it, the more that we push the answers away from us. So it got to a point where I didn't know the answers. I just knew that I'm going to be okay with where I'm at today. And I know that the answers will come. And this didn't happen overnight, because trust me, I mean, I was like a year or 2 years like in depression, and I was very upset, and it took me a while to get to that state. But like once I finally said, you know what, I know there's a divine power. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. You know, I've read all these books, but nothing really can tell me for sure what it is. And I know there's something here. I don't know what it is though. And I'm going to be okay with that and just go with life. And I know I'll understand it in time. And when I surrendered and I kind of just took down that mindset, that's when the answers actually started coming. Like they just started presenting themselves in very serendipitous ways, and ways that I wouldn't have even fathomed of them happening. And all these like coincidences that we call coincidences, and things would happen that would like, oh wow, I never, you know, and all these like things would happen. And then it's interesting because like, you know, you look back, when I look back at my life 10 years from then, it's like, wow, it's like, man, like, you know, God or the universe or whatever you want to call the spiritual power was like perfectly weaving this thing for me. But I was so in it that I couldn't see any of it at the time, you know? And then when I look back, I'm like, man, it worked out perfectly, you know?
So I agree with that. I think that there's an element that you're not talking about right now, though, that I think has as much to do with what happened to you and what would happen to me and what can happen to anyone. And it's the fact that yes, all that stuff will happen and things do work out for the good, right? But you have to put yourself in that position to be successful. You can't just like give up and sit back and then wait for good things to happen to you. It doesn't work that way. You actually were proactive, which really to me is you set yourself up for success. You were proactive in the sense that you went and got a mentor. you started reading, you started doing some things that your mentor told you to do. You read books, you went out on your own and read a lot of business books. So there were things that you did. You didn't just sit
Sure.
back.
So for me, finding the mentor, I wasn't looking for one.
Mm-hmm.
Like it found me. He found me, and a lot of events that were out of my complete power, like happened for me to. Yes, I did have to take the opportunity, right? Someone showed up to my house randomly that I hadn't seen in years and gave me a card that, pointed me to do this meditative exercise, that then pointed me to a certain book, that then pointed me to this mentor. And but it wasn't, I didn't do anything for that opportunity to come to myself, but I had to be open and receptive
Correct.
to accept the opportunity when it did come.
Correct.
So there's just like this fine balance of doing and not doing at the same time. It's really hard to put tangible, but it's like this. It's like an art, It's an art of like doing and letting go, and applying effort, but not too much effort, like not forcing or not struggling, So it's like this weird play at balance that we're always like going through, trying to master,
Gabriel, why are we talking so much about just really honestly the psychological aspect of being successful? Why is this important?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty much like 80 to 90% for, accountable for what your success in life, right? I mean, if you got that right, everything else will fall into place,
I agree. Talk about why, like how, like there might be some people who are listening to this right now and like saying, Brian, we're 20 plus minutes into this thing and you haven't told us anything about real estate yet.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can take these concepts that we're talking about, right? Or just the whole psychology and spiritual aspect of success and apply it in anything and it'll work. It doesn't matter whether it's real estate or stocks or, business or whatever. Like it's universal. It works anywhere and with everyone,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the older I get and the more I read, I realize that it's all about like when I did my first deal and I made $10,000 on my very first deal, it completely changed my perspective. It changed my outlook. Like I'd never made that much money all at once before, ever.
Right.
And it just changed everything about me psychologically, spiritually, physically, like everything. Like it gave me confidence that I never had before to make me want to go out there and do it again. So I just think that this business is, like you just said, 80 and 90% psychological, spiritual, whatever you want to put your finger on. It's so much that, and that's why I try to spend a lot of time focusing on that aspect of it. So if you're listening to this right now, pick up those books that we've been recommending, pick up do the psychological stuff, like the motivating stuff, like get yourself motivated, get out there and take action and do. So that's the definite first step for me. So let's get back to real estate. Let's talk about specifically real estate. I want you to talk about Rich Dad Education. It seems to me like you probably went to that seminar because you had heard the name Rich Dad. You read the book, it sounds like. It happened to me. I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I thought Robert Kiyosaki was coming to Birmingham. Really and truly did. Right. He was not there. It was a sales pitch. Talk about I don't want you to maybe necessarily say, I don't want you to go like too deep, but talk about just your experience of just going through a seminar period and how it sounds to me like that's what got you interested in real estate to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, it was scary for me at the time because I went, the funnel, right? They take you to the free one, and then the free one, they sell you on like a bigger one. And so, at the time, I was around like average middle-class people the entire time. So when you talk to people about this stuff, they think you're drinking the Kool-Aid. They think you're like, this is not, it's just, they just bash all this stuff. And so, I had to kind of keep quiet about all these things. And a part of me, like, you still have that thing itching in your mind. Like, is this a scam? Like, is this really real? And all these things. I remember I had to pay, I think it was like $500 or whatever it was to go to the 3-day event, and at that time, like I didn't have $500, like I was broke. And like, I had a credit card and I'm like, should I really put this on the credit card? Like that was a defining moment, you know? And I, you know, this is another concept we can get into, but like every time that I've done the most scariest things for me in my life, that some, you know, you don't know if they're the right thing to do or whatever, but every time I've done those things, that's where massive growth has always happened. Yes. Always. So, you know, when I went to the seminar again, like, same feeling. I'm like, oh, Kiyosaki's not here. But, you know, I was there to learn. And when I like going to those 3 days, and that thing turned me on. Like I left so pumped out of there, and I wanted to buy. I was ready to buy their $100,000 package or whatever it was. I had called my dad that day. I'm like, Dad, I have this plan. I'm gonna make you all your money back and more. I need 30 grand to do this. My dad just like click, you know, he thought I was crazy. Just hung up the phone on me. But I was like all in. You know, I'm like, I could see it. I'm like, I could see the money here. I can see the success. They have a formula. This makes perfect sense to me. I'm going all in. Like, this is what I want to do. So it didn't work out getting the coach. I knew I needed a coach. And then that's, you know, from there, that's when I just kept going to events and meeting people. And eventually I was able to find one that I could afford, and things worked itself out, you know?
Yeah. So it sounds to me like you said you needed a coach. Like, so you've already had experience with mentorship, you know, with spiritually, and now you felt like you still needed that mentorship to get off the ground with your real estate business. Is that how you kind of got started in real estate, is you found a local coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew I could do it on my own, but I'm like, man, how long is this going to take me? You know, like, and I already tried to do it on my own after Rich Dad. Like, you know, I wasn't going to let not me being able to afford their package stop me from doing what I wanted to do. So I started putting banded signs out and calling everyone on the Craigslist ad and building my buyers list and taking action. And eventually I did get a deal. I got a deal like 3 months after that I daisy chained for somebody, and I made like $1,000 on. It was like the most stressful $1,000 I ever made because people were trying to take advantage of me. I had no idea what I was doing. But you know, every day I was spending 2 to 3 hours just doing the YouTube videos, reading, learning, implementing all this. And I knew, I'm like, man, I'm spending so much time and energy that I know if I just find someone who can just tell me, Gabe, just do A plus B equals C and follow that formula.
Yep.
I will get there so much more faster, and I'll be more confident. Because right now, yeah, I learned this stuff at the seminar and I know this stuff works, but I don't know the whole formula. I'm just kind of going off what they told me, and I'm kind of taking zigs and zags and turning here and turning there. But, you know, I'm wasting time and effort and energy, and I just want to get there as fast as I possibly can, you know?
Yeah, I did the same thing. You know, I felt like I actually got their package and started doing their classes. And the big thing that I found was lacking, and it was good information. It was, you know, it was great information, especially for someone who's brand new. But the one thing I found that was lacking was the local mentor piece.
Right.
The local mentor. So I think that was what was lacking for me. And that's what I needed to take the next step. You're mentioned, I've heard you say this. I don't know if I think you said this on I was listening to you on a couple other podcasts, preparing for this. And I think I heard you say that maybe you said it earlier today, that your mentor, you were just splitting deals with them. You didn't really pay them up front. Is that how it kind of worked?
No, I did. I paid him $5,500 up front.
Okay.
And then I had to split 3 deals with him and make him a minimum of $30K. So if in those 3 deals he didn't make $30K, then I had to continue to split more until he got to $30K net on his end.
On his end.
Yeah.
How did you find a mentor? Like, how did you know how did you choose one? How did you know that he was the right one?
Actually, Ray Gonzalez pointed me to him. So I was playing cash flow online, the cash flow game from Rich Dad Poor Dad all the time. Right? During my off times at work, I would play that. And then I started, like, you know, you start meeting people on the game. And then, like, I was talking to a guy there, and he's like, bro, do you know who Ken Clothier is? I'm like, no. He's like, he's having an event in Deerfield. He's like, you should go. So I actually called Seema up. I called Ken's office. Seema picked up the phone and I told her about me. And she's like, just don't worry. She's like, I didn't have the money. And she's like, just come for free. Cause I think they were charging like $1,000 or $2,000 to go to the event. And I told her about myself, and she's like, just come for free. So I actually went. It was in January of 14. And then that's where I met Ray. I met Ray at that event. And the same thing.
January of 14? So that was like over a year after you went to the Rich Dad event.
January of 13, I'm sorry. of 13.
Oh, so it was a couple months later.
It was a couple months later. Yeah.
Okay,
It was like 2 or 3 months later. So, that's where I met Ray, and Ray's like, hey, there's this guy locally, like you should go check out the RIA. And I didn't even know what a RIA was at the time. But he's like, take out this guy. This guy's a beast. And so I started going to his classes, and I wanted to pay for Kent too, but I couldn't afford it. I think Kent at the time was charging like, you know, I think it was like, I don't remember exactly. It was like 10 or 15 grand just to kind of go to his house for one day and kind of hang out. And, you know, like I didn't have the money to do that. So, I started going to the RIAs, and this guy had a different strategy when everybody else was teaching. But this guy was local in our market. So he was just teaching everyone. He was teaching everyone at the time. REOs were hot during that phase of the business. So he was just teaching everyone, like, you don't need money. All you need is to buy this little software, go online and just make a ton of offers, and eventually you're going to get one and follow up. So I'm like, well, this makes sense. So I started doing that. And then again, like, it's hard, like, you know, especially when you make your first offer and you don't know what the hell you're doing. Like, I didn't know the conversation to have with the agent. Sometimes they would ask me certain questions about, like, where's the escrow coming from this? I didn't even know, like, I didn't know how to handle those conversations. So, like, you just start winging it as much as you can, and then you keep running into the wall. So I'm like, man, if I can just get this guy to just show me exactly what he does, I'll make it work. And then I told my wife, I'm like, look, you should come meet this guy. Like, this guy and what I liked about Dave is that all these other guys were like young and flashy, and like, you know, they were very flashy, you know, Kent, not so much, but like the guy at Rich Dad was extremely flashy, you know, like probably had like a $30,000 or $40,000 watch on, drove a Bentley, you know, like, you know, really, this guy just dressed like a normal Joe. You know, he was an older gentleman. Dave at the time was probably in his late 50s to early 60s. And he seemed just so humble. And I'm like, man, he seemed like he had so much experience, not only in real estate, but just in life. And I'm like, man, this, you know, I'm like, I didn't feel any pressure. And he wasn't like a hard seller on anyone. Like, he was a very just laid back, easygoing guy. So I really liked his style. But yeah, eventually my wife was able to, you know, when my wife got the money, she put it down. She's like, look, she's like, I think you can do it. And I believe in you. And, you know, I think you can easily make the money. And they were averaging, like, I think he said their average profit was like 10,000 a deal. So, you know, I was just like, all right, let's go. So eventually we signed up with him. I think it was like May of 2013. And then I started like August, I think, of 13. And then after with him, it took me like, I didn't close my first deal till like November of 13 with him. And that was also like my hardest deal like I've ever done. It was so stressful. But then the next year by March, I had built a big enough pipeline where I felt confident that I was done. So I quit my job, you know, around March time. I'm like, I'm done with this. I was getting in trouble already at work because I was spending so much time, my free time at work, like taking phone calls, running my business, and I started getting reprimanded. So yeah, I called my mentor up. I'm like, hey, I need to leave. And he encouraged me. He's like, take off, you know? And he talked to my wife. He's like, hey, he's going to be fine. He's like, I've never told anyone, any of my students to quit their job. Gabe is like the first person I've ever told to quit this job, but I know he's so committed that he's going to make it work. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. You know? So I gave my wife also some like reassurance or whatever. And it worked out, you know?
Sounds like you had an awesome wife. Awesome, yeah. Supportive wife. Gabe, talk about like the story, like let the story continue for a while. Like where are you today? Like, what does your wholesaling business look like today?
Yeah. So, we're a $2 million plus wholesale company right now. We got, I always forget how many people we have, but I have 4 lead managers. So those are their people who basically just handle our incoming leads and book appointments for my outside guys. I have an acquisition guy that just goes on the appointments. Me and my partner, I do have a partner, which, you know, I started by myself. We ended up partnering in 2015 is when we started this company, Florida Cash Loan Buyers, together. And a partner, I have a transaction coordinator, a disposition rep, a controller on the finance side. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. And we just got a couple of VAs that help us with like marketing admin stuff, but they're not like, I don't really consider them like part of like the core team, you know, but yeah.
If you had, and I'm sure there's many different directions you could take this question, but if you had to pinpoint one specific thing that you did right to get from 2013, 14 when you had your mentor to where you are today with a $2+ million wholesaling business, give me one, maybe two things that these are the two keys that allowed me to get from A to where I am today.
So after the mentor, like not before, right?
Correct.
I would say, building systems and processes was definitely one. When me and my partner first started, we read the E-Myth together. For those of you who don't know, have you recommended that book in your show before?
Totally. Michael Gerber is huge, a game changer. The E-Myth is traction before there was attraction. Like the E-Myth is like the original.
Yeah, exactly. So the E-Myth was our Bible at the time. So like we went through the whole story like together, and like we took our time. So like a lot of people, they want to rush and just pound. We did the opposite. Like we're like, let's build this thing right. Like let's use these tools from these other guys that can see 10 feet ahead of us or whatever. And let's follow these steps and do that. So putting the right systems and processes in place, I think, was paramount. And then I would say the other thing, it's tough to just pinpoint to two things, but marketing, having a focus on marketing and driving leads in was also a game changer. Because once we learned how to just, hey, we can create this process that drives in leads, no matter what, like, and it can be delegated and it doesn't require us for those leads to come in. That was a game changer, because now we're just able to focus on like, hey, now they're calling, what do we do? Like, how do we handle these leads? That, and still the consistent search for information. Like, when we joined the mastermind, I know you wanted two, but I guess I'll do three. But when we joined the mastermind, we were already at 1 million when we got to our mastermind. And when we joined our mastermind, our business doubled the next year. Cause like it was more of a confidence thing than a knowledge thing, but it was just like being around all these people and seeing like how big their businesses were and like all the staff that they had. And I'm like, man, if this guy could do it, I could do it too. Like, it was just a mindset shift, like, cause you have like, you want everything to be right sometimes. And like, and that's kind of one of my flaws is sometimes I can tend to be a little bit of a perfectionist. Mm-hmm. So like being in the mastermind kind of taught me more to just roll with it. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. And like, these guys got project managers and acquisition reps and this and that, like, just copy. And so that's what I did, and so our business grew way faster when we got that. So in the beginning was to get from 0 to 1 million, I would say was a focus on marketing. Like, we had to get the marketing right to get from 0 to 1 million. There's no way it wasn't going to happen without getting the lead flow in. So that was from 0 to 1 million, but then from 1 million to 2 million was the combination of bringing the right talent in and having the processes for that talent to apply to take us to the next level.
You said something when you said you went really slow in the beginning and made sure you did it the right way. Are the words that you said. Give me an example of doing what the right way. Like, give me an example of what that means.
Yeah. So like, we read the whole E-Myth together, right? So like, we would meet once a week. So on Friday, like, instead of like pounding the ground and making calls and doing all that, we would take the day off. And me and my partner would just meet and read the whole chapter of the E-Myth. And then, when he talks about like the lady with the cup, I think it's like a cupcake. I think it's a cupcake place or a pie place. And he says the story about her of, how her dream died and all she's so focused on making money and she forgot about like the quality of the pies and the love that she used to cook the pies with and all these things. We started building these things like, hey, what lights you up? Like, why are we doing this? You know, where are we trying to go? What are we trying to accomplish? Like, and getting the whole vision piece and the strategy piece like dialed in for us. That's what I mean by kind of going slower. You know, it was, we could have said, hey, we got to crank the engines, man. Just keep making the calls Friday and doing that. And we did it. You know, we wanted to build the foundation for the business and be clear with each other where we wanted to go. So me and my partner can be in alignment, because the last thing you want to do is, you know, be in a partnership where you're not aligned, you know? So yeah.
I think a lot of people say, you know what I want to take things a little bit slower, but they say things like, no, I need to go out and get my business cards, and I need to go out and get all my, my index cards and my highlighters and my, you know, all these things, all these office supplies. And just, I call that like busy work. Like they just want to like make themselves do a couple of things that are going to keep them busy to make them feel like they're actually doing something in the business. But none of those things are actually like, you know, making their businesses go forward. Right. You're trying to dial in your actual like vision, your actual like why are we doing this? And that's what it sounds like that's what kind of led you to your initial successes.
Yeah. And mind you, we didn't start doing that till we already had some like type of success, right? Because like in the beginning, it was just like when I got my mentor, like we started doing that once we got to like, when I joined my partner in 2015 is when we started doing that. And, you know, the year before I probably made like 250 on my own, and he was around the same revenue mark. So, you know, we were already making money. You know, we already had the engines cranking, like, and I, you know, so, you know, in the beginning, like I had a full-time job. So the way I used to manage my time was, I was luckily that I had a job, and I really recommend this to anyone who's listening, who's got a job. Like, you need to find a job that can give you time. Because if you have a job where you're fully engaged in all 8 hours in the day, it's going to be really, really hard to get your business off the ground. Like I had a job that it was working in a warehouse actually. And man, they run like an extremely tight ship. Like, you know, they don't want you taking breaks, number one. And if they see you taking a break on the floor, man, they would chew you out. Like, it just wasn't the place for me. And when I started working at Humana, it was a very relaxed environment. I had my little cubicle. I can do my thing. Most people, when they do their job, they just start talking, they start gossiping, they start talking about yesterday's events, and they use their downtime for that. And so I figured like, hey, I'm at this job. If I really focus and I zone in, I can get all my work done in like 6 hours, maybe even 5 on some days where it was really slow. So those 2 to 3 extra hours were time spent making phone calls, following up on offers, reading, doing something that was going to help me grow. And so the way I grew my business, and that it only took me about a year, a little over a year to leave my job, was I would get up at 5 a.m. every single day, because I'm a morning guy. So I knew that if I got up at 5, my job was literally 5 minutes away. So I had a nice setup, and I could literally just walk to work. So what I did was I was up at 5, and from 5 to like 7, I was just making offers on the MLS and following up. That's all I would do. So those 2 hours was like my zone time, because I had no distractions, no one was up, and I was extremely focused. Then what I later learned to do was I can eat at work during my working hours and use my hour of lunch to actually work. So I would print out a list of all the offers that I had. So during my lunchtime, it was just follow-up time. Where does my offer stand? Blah, blah, blah. Just following up. And then when I got back to home at night, I would work sometimes at night, but not so much. Like, there are some days where I put in 30 minutes or an hour, but it was really the 2 hours in the morning, the lunch break that I would take off to follow up, and then just the extra hour or 2 that I would create and work during the daytime to pick up calls, answer calls, ask my mentor questions, read a book to find an answer that I need. Between that, I was able to create enough momentum for me to get going. So to your point, getting business cards and all that stuff, if it helps you get momentum, that's fine, but you need momentum. Like, Darren Hardy talks about this a lot in the compound effect, but in the beginning, like building momentum for any business is so hard. But once you have enough force pushing that big rock of momentum down, then the thing starts moving on its own. But you got to push that thing hard as hell in the beginning to get that rock moving,
It's awesome stuff, man. 100% agree. And there are a lot of people that probably listen to this. There's a lot of people that I'm coaching who do have jobs, and they struggle with how do they make the two things work. And I love the advice that you gave, the actionable stuff. I love giving actionable advice on this podcast. I love the actionable the example where this is exactly how I created an extra hour or two at work. And I use my lunch hour. I think most places allow you to eat. You can eat lunch anytime, but use your lunch hour to actually get some work done. And getting up early, I mean, I just can't, like for me, I've got two little kids. I got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And come 6:30, 6:45,
They're out.
those little kids are like running all over the house making a bunch of noise. So that means I got to get up even earlier if I want to. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of writing and journaling. And if I want to do that and accomplish, I have to do it in the morning. So that's awesome stuff. Gabriel, before we go, I really do appreciate you coming on the show. And I think that people are going to get a lot of value out of this, especially your story. You got an incredible story. Before we go, though, I want you to talk about something that you mentioned in the very beginning. You said that you want to create something that's going to be bigger, more of a legacy. You mentioned that you want to be do more speaking, do more influencing, like becoming more of an influencer. What does that mean to you? What does that actually like talk about what that looks like for you in your life here as we go forward?
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of designing that as we go, right? Like, right now I'm heavily still involved in my business. Even though I got all what like Michael Gerber talks about, all the technicians, right? I got all the technicians set. But I'm still I'm like in between manager and entrepreneur. So I really need to get a good manager in place so that I can then become truly the entrepreneur. And that's kind of where I'm at the stage. But for me, like, I don't know, dude, I want to create something that's, I can definitely see myself speaking on stage to hundreds or thousands of people. I can see myself in the future maybe publishing some books and doing something like I want to do something on a bigger scale that can impact people. And so I see real estate as the platform in the beginning because that's where I have the experience. I already have a following there. People know who I am there, and I have influence in that range. But eventually I like to just get to something even a little bit larger than real estate where I can go to a more mass market and just help people, like it fuels my tank when I go to any real estate event or seminar and people would just randomly like come up to me like, hey Gabe, dude, I saw this video and like, you don't understand, it made a huge impact in my life. Like when I hear those things, I guess I'm a words of affirmation type guy, I'm the love language. So those things like just fuel my tank up,
That's awesome, man. I think that we have very similar paths, very similar things that we've done in our past and in our futures, where real estate to me, like I love real estate, but to me it's more about real estate was a means to get to an end. And sure. I feel like the end for me, I used to be a teacher, I used to be a coach. Like I love teaching and educating people with not just real estate, but just in business in general. So I think that's really cool. Trying to leave a legacy, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Can't thank you enough. Any last bit of words you want to give as we wrap up?
No, man. I mean, I would say probably just for those listening, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, whether it's real estate or building a business or whatever it is, like just be all in, man. Like, stop the excuses, be 100% obsessed about what you're going to do. A lot of people have they think the word obsession is like a negative connotation, but you really have to become obsessed with what you're doing if it's going to flourish. So just go all in, man. Like, burn the bridges, drop the excuses, go all in and see it all the way through,
Totally. That's awesome, man. Guys, we love you so much. Thank you again, Gabriel, for coming on the show. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button. We got some incredible guests lined up for you guys to hear from here in the very, very near future. We love you so much. We'll see you next time.